I was born 3 weeks after Castro took over in 1959. And one weekend we saw large gray ships. Next weekend we couldn't even leave our small town. An overturned bus that was burned out, and they told us this is what will happen to you. I was born 3 weeks after Castro took over in 1959, and it looks like my dad had waited to see how the Cuban government was going to work out. And so my dad and my mom had seen things changing, and they started making alternate plans. And so basically we left for family opportunity. Castro had shut down Bacardi plants and really lost revenue, and they were depending on the Russians. And so as things changed, we used to go to the coast quite a bit, to the beach quite a bit. We lived in the back part of the island in a small town called Holguín. And one weekend we saw large gray ships. The next weekend we couldn't even leave our small town. They had an overturned bus that was burned out, and they told us this is what will happen to you, like these college kids the week before. And my dad told them that he was going to turn around right back there. And they really clamped down on the neighborhoods and the city blocks and so on. My parents, we left in March of '65, and so they had applied for an exit visa 2 years before that approximately. It took 18 months to 2 years to receive it. And so I realized that before that, my parents had to have anything that they had tried to send across to the U.S. And my dad had sent some things over to Mexico City, where his brother, another brother, lived. He had to do that between 1959 and 1963, because once he applied, you became a conspirator to the government. You were anti-government, and so he had that underway already. He had microfished his diploma. He was a doctor, and microfished those things and sent them over, and sent money to both places. He basically got to keep 1/10 of what he sent over. The other 90% just disappeared. There were inventories taken of the house and his office and whatever he had when they applied. You weren't told that you were going to get an exit visa 18 months later. So 18 months later, they said, well, you were given the right to leave, and they had to have the inventory exactly the way it was a year and a half earlier. Process of leaving, we had driven all the way from Holguín. It was about 600 miles to Havana, and turned in the last possessions of the car. And I remember that my mom's wedding band was taken at the airport. One thing that I found out a few years later, in the early 70s, visiting Puerto Rico with a friend of my dad's, was that they had alternate plans. And this gentleman and his wife were those alternate plans on a boat. And someone was waiting for them with a gun, and they were put in prison for 5 years. And when they were let out, they escaped to Puerto Rico. And I remember sitting at dinner, listening to his story, and I said, "Dad, what is he talking about?" And that's what it was about. So we'd gone to Mexico City. The purpose probably was to get his paperwork in order to enter the United States. Maybe it wasn't as easy as it is now. And we flew from there to Miami. We flew over in a propeller plane, probably a Russian plane. And I remember the stewardess telling my brother and I, because we were 6 and 8 years old, that we were being too loud. And she walks over to my dad and tells him that if your sons aren't quiet, don't get quiet, we're going to ask them to get off the plane. So when you're 6 or 8, you be quiet, and it did the trick. So from there we went to to Miami, and went through part of the first grade there, and my father took tests trying to regain his status as a doctor. And then we ended up in San Antonio, Texas, where the Health Science Center was. He was allowed to be a doctor, but he couldn't practice as a surgeon unless he redid his surgery. And in 1966, he began a surgery rotation there.